So as many of you may know by now, Stadia is dead, and for the majority of us gamers, players, consumers, it's kind of like a, okay, moving on kind of situation because so few people were interested in Stadia and the way it executed cloud streaming subscription-based gaming service. But when it comes to how poorly its shutdown was managed by the heads at Google, I mean, it's really baffling the way they've so negatively impacted developers who were working on games for Stadia and didn't know that Stadia was shutting down before its announcement. Even employees weren't made aware, and we're going to dive into all of that in this video. But for those who want a quick refresher, Google Stadia is officially dead, as noted here by the Killed by Google website, the Google Graveyard, highlighting all of the unceremoniously terminated projects. Google Stadia will shut down on January of 2023, and this was detailed by Google itself via this blog post published on September 29th, where they not only detailed that they've made the difficult decision to wind down Stadia because the service just didn't gain the traction that they were hoping for, they also detailed how they will be refunding all Stadia hardware purchases made through the Google Store and all game and add-on content purchases made through the Stadia Store. Though any subscription fees that were paid prior to this announcement won't be refunded, so that's something worth keeping in mind. And amidst all this, something that people are pointing out is how all of this goes counter to Google's own promises. Jason Schreier pointed out here Phil Harrison in 2019 versus 3 years later. You can see right here when asked whether this will end up being yet another Google project that will disappear in a few years like Google+, Phil Harrison assured that the level of investment that we've put into Stadia and all these things, it's indicative of something that they're going to support for the long term, he claimed, stating that, "I understand the concern, but you don't have to be concerned." On multiple occasions, Google denied rumors that Stadia would be shutting down, like this rumor started by Twitter user Killed by Google. Stadia's official Twitter page provided a direct response to those rumors, insisting that Stadia is not shutting down. It would not be long after that we'd find more writing on the wall that Stadia would be shutting down, especially with how most recently, when Logitech announced its new cloud gaming handheld last week, Stadia was one of the few cloud gaming services not mentioned. Which brings us to yesterday when Stadia made it official that Stadia would be shutting down come January of 2023. And with what a piss poor job they did managing this shutdown, and with how little communication there was between Stadia and the developers and the employees, people are already making fun of how Google Stadia itself was mismanaged and how poorly it launched. Here's a tweet from senior gameplay programmer at Rocksteady Games, who satirically posted the following: "To be fair, Google Stadia faced terrible odds in the past 3 years, having to deal with a global pandemic forcing people to turn to online entertainment and graphics cards and console shortages creating high demand for alternatives. If only they hit the market at a better time. When your online cloud gaming subscription service can't even leverage the pandemic, which was a huge boost for plenty of game companies and game services out there, and the hardware shortages that cloud gaming isn't limited by, when you're struggling even under these ideal conditions, that's when you know you have a problem." But the way they blindsided their own partner developers and employees is especially egregious. Forbes editor Paul Tassi made it a point to highlight how Google refunding Stadia players is great and all, but maybe they should have talked to any developers. And here are some examples of developers who were kind of screwed over by Google's lack of communication. Let's actually take a look at Tom's tweet here, who is an indie developer working on Tangle Tower. He tweeted, "Tangle Tower was due to launch on Stadia in 2 days' time, and this article was the first I heard about it shutting down. While this game is on other platforms, keep in mind that it's a significant time and financial investment to port a game over to another platform like Stadia. And so for Tom, all of that effort and all of the money he spent on this port feels like it's gone to waste." Same thing goes for Rebecca Heineman, who is in a similar situation and responded to Tom with this tweet: "We have a title coming out November 1st. Now we hear about this." And in a follow-up tweet, she said that we're still wondering how to proceed. Bummer. Here we have another developer, James Simpson, who responded to Tom with, "We still haven't heard anything from Stadia either, though fortunately we're still quite a ways out from launch." So James' game is far enough away from its Stadia launch that the damage wasn't as bad, but communications-wise, James is experiencing something similar where there's basically no communication. Here's another testimonial from WRKS Games. "We literally signed the publishing agreement with Stadia last week, so I would assume the internal teams there, who are lovely, are likely finding this out at the same time we are." Again, employees were not made aware of Stadia's shutdown either, so they proceeded as if Stadia would be a long-term thing. And these employees, not knowing this was going to go down like this, had a super energetic meeting with WRKS Games. Next up, we got Petrichor Inc. expressing their disappointment. Yeah, we were just starting to pick back up development of our game Battle Billiards that we'd signed with them. We really only had planned to bring it to Stadia. Really quite a disappointment for the team. So this developer was making this game exclusively for Stadia. And for those wondering why would developers think of making a game just for Stadia, that's because Stadia was spending money and essentially giving out cash infusions to developers who would bring their games to their platform. And so this just essentially helped fund these games. But now that Stadia is going away, people are waiting to see how these contracts will be dealt with. Here's another developer who's especially furious that so much work is just going down the drain. Simon Roth tweeted, "Oh boy, very happy to see months of my work going in the bin again. I sure do love game development." Scrolling down, "So glad I severely stressed myself over jumping through all the hoops of their platform compliance using an API that was documented poorly and in the wrong language. Anyway, Stadia was actually technically sound and worked well, but was doomed from the start by the fact that Google made it. I couldn't have said it better myself." Seemingly, Stadia's development infrastructure made it difficult enough for developers to port their games over, but announce a shutdown like this after so many developers were on their way to going through the hoops that they have to jump through in order to make a Stadia port work, I cannot imagine how infuriating that must be. Next up, we got Mike Rose, who is the founder of publisher No More Robots HQ. Here is his take on this whole situation. "Oh my god, we have a game coming to Stadia in November. Who wants to guess that Google will refuse to pay us the money they owe us for it?" Referencing the fact that certain deals and contracts with Stadia don't pay out until after a game has launched, but with Stadia shutting down, there is no reason for developers to continue working on a Stadia version of a game or on a Stadia exclusive title. The fear is that even amidst this awful situation, Google will decide that they're not going to pay out what was promised. Mike Rose continues, "To all the people who kept begging us, please bring your games to Stadia. This is why we didn't. Haha." Hours later, and I still have no email from Stadia. Still, the communication is awful and lackluster amidst all this confusion going on amongst Stadia developers and no clarity on what's happening with our games, deals, anything. Really would have been nice if they told partners or even got in contact with us by now. I mean, the right thing to do would have been to get in contact with partners and developers weeks, if not months in advance. But the fact that even now communication from Stadia remains non-existent, that's just negligence on a whole other level. Here's another developer reaction, this one from Brandon Sheffield, who is a director over at Necrosoft Games. He tweeted, "I know everybody's having a great time laughing at this, but Stadia had the best developer revenue of any streaming service, and launching Hyper Gunsport there was going to recoup our development costs. We were launching there in November on Stadia in November and are now in a much tougher situation. The Stadia higher-ups pulled the plug on Stadia without doing proper due diligence and without considering the ripple effect that this would have and just how much damage they were going to do to, especially indie developers who are financially not in the place that multi-billion-dollar publishers and game development studios are." Brandon continues, "I actually don't know what's going to happen with our Stadia launch yet. We're still launching on other platforms, but Google paid by percentage of time played by Stadia Pro users, which was great, and they were the only company that did it, so it was guaranteed return, except that's no longer happening or will be severely hampered by the fact that Stadia is going offline in the next few months. I'll find out soon what's going on with our launch, but I was counting on at least a several-month tail of players with which to recoup. Expectations of financial returns from this endeavor were completely ruined by Stadia's lack of communication and their negligence of developers, especially the indies who, especially can't afford to take significant losses. Something else worth highlighting is that Stadia was also a useful tool during game development for certain companies like Bungie. As Paul Tassi pointed out here, other places like Bungie use Stadia to more easily test the game while working from home. Guessing they also just found out today that's out the window, judging by this tweet from Joe Blackburn, game director for Destiny 2 at Bungie, who tweeted, "The development at Stadia created a development platform that's empowered us to continue to create and evaluate Destiny 2 from home over the past few years, with the pandemic forcing many into a remote setup work environment. I'm sure today is rough for a lot of folks, Thanks for helping us make games. But beyond being a convenient development tool, keep in mind that Destiny 2 was one of the flagship games on Stadia, and so now Bungie has to reevaluate all of that. Bungie has begun conversations about next steps for Destiny 2 players on Google Stadia. Stay tuned for more updates. Because Stadia is a cloud-only based service, folks who play Destiny 2 through Stadia exclusively are going to lose access to the game, and so Bungie is seemingly trying to work out something to make the transition from Stadia to other platforms for the Stadia Destiny 2 players smoother. Already plenty of outlets are reporting on this and talking to developers who are expressing their disappointment and, anger at the way Google mismanaged all this. So here we have game developer Rebecca Heineman, who spoke to Axios and said, this is news to me, when she found out that Stadia was shutting down at the same time that the public did. Heineman's Stadia rep later confirmed the news. She was apologizing up and down about it, and it's not the representative's fault because she didn't know about it, because Stadia and Google higher-ups didn't even tell employees. Now with Heineman, she's been fortunate enough to have a representative who unpromptedly brought up the topic of reimbursement. She asked me, how much money did I invest into making the game? And right here you can see the kind of financial investment that can go into games. Heineman quickly tallied a 5-figure sum for development costs and expected profits for what was to be the November Stadia Pro release of Luxor Evolved. Heineman estimated the lost revenue would have been in the 6 figures if Luxor Evolved wasn't also planned for a release in 2023 on Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch. This is a game that first came out on PC and was planned to be ported over to Stadia and then to other platforms. Fortunately, outside of PC, she didn't go Stadia exclusive, as that would have cost her tremendously. Now, in Rebecca Heinemann's case, it does seem like behind-the-scenes discussions are going well with this development studio. Our friends at Google are working to make it right for us, but there are still plenty of other developers who are waiting for any kind of response from Stadia and Google, who are waiting to hear back on how they're going to be compensated, given that Stadia baited these developers and misled them outright into spending a lot more time and money into a project that they wouldn't have spent all that time and money on if they had known that the platform that they were going to make it for was going to be shut down in the not-so-distant future. News outlet Kotaku also covered this whole situation and spoke to various developers. The article begins by detailing how the folks at Stadia stays in touch with developers who are interested in bringing their games over to Stadia. Studios have partner managers at Stadia to help with the process of porting games and the like. Many had spoken to their counterparts as recently as this week, and there was no hint that anything was awry because those partner managers also had no idea. Goldfire Studios founder James Simpson told Kotaku, "We'd signed a deal and had been working towards a release on Stadia/Stadia Pro for Arctic Awakening in 2023. We just had communication with our partner manager earlier in the week going through some next steps, so there was no indication that anything was changing." I already shared some sentiments from Mike Rose, founder of publisher No More Robots, but he also wrote to Kotaku the following quote in an email: "We have a game on there called High Simulator, which was due to come out of early access in 2023, so our recent development for that on Stadia has been obviously pointless. We were also due to launch Soccer Story on Stadia in November, and that has money attached to it that we're meant to receive. It could be that we're still going to see that, but given that we literally can't release on Stadia anymore, I'm not holding my breath, because again, certain Stadia contracts don't pay out until after a game has launched. But if a development studio has already been working on a game, not knowing that Stadia was going to close down, then they may be in a situation where they can't launch the game but have poured all this time and money into this game that they thought would be able to live on Stadia for at least a couple years. So if Google and Stadia were to choose to not compensate those developers, that would be an incredibly scummy thing, and Google's PR and optics would have hell to pay. Here we have some final quotes from developers Simpson and Rose. Simpson told Kotaku, "To be honest, based on Google's track record, we'd been moving forward fairly cautiously and fortunately hadn't invested too much into the port of Stadia outside of lost time on planning how it would work compared to Steam or consoles, working through integration tests and so on. I suppose this is why they struggle to onboard developers. It's hard to fully commit to them if they won't fully commit to us. Hell, Google and Stadia couldn't even commit to the first-party studios that they founded. They weren't even given a chance to ship a game before they were shut down, around a year, less than a year after their founding and establishment? Instead of fostering genuine trust and relationships between Stadia and development partners, they just kind of tried throwing money at this thing until something clicked, but it's just not how this works. You can't just throw money at something. You have to nurture a platform and its environment and the trust surrounding it. Then we have one more quote here from Mike Rose, who were literally preparing the release build for submission this week. So yeah, obviously we're pretty pissed off. We'll see if anyone from Google gets in touch with us, but I feel doubtful. So yeah, on the developer side of things, this is kind of where the discourse is at. And then moving on, here we have the employees' perspective of this whole situation. Google's Phil Harrison told employees of Stadia's shutdown minutes before it went public. The way Stadia employees found out, according to this article, is that at 7 a.m. on the day of, hours before the announcement went public, Google Vice President and General Manager of Stadia, Phil Harrison, urged all team members to attend an 8:30 a.m. meeting. This was something that was initially relayed by an anonymous Reddit user that 9to5 Google then confirmed via multiple sources that there was indeed such a meeting. It was held just 45 minutes before the public announcement, and that's when employees were told of Stadia's impending shutdown. Here we have a post from a Reddit user who claims to be a Stadia engineer who relayed via Reddit that none of us knew this would happen, and this is how Phil announced this to all of us at 8:30 a.m. PT Pacific Time this morning, referring to an email that looks something like this: confidential, internal only, from Phil Harrison at google.com. Hi everyone, we'll be having a Stadia team meeting today, September 29th at 8:30 a.m. Pacific to share some important updates with everyone. Not even warning that this was going to be a shutdown of Stadia, but rather an important update of some sort. Apologies for the short notice. We would appreciate it if you can please prioritize attending this meeting or check in with your manager afterwards if you can't make it. Details have been added to your calendars. This will be a virtual-only meeting, so please feel free to join from wherever you're working today. Some Google employees who are working on Stadia have already spoken out, like Peter Elst here, senior software engineer at Google. It's a weird experience starting your workday and realizing the feature you've been working on for 6+ months and we're launching soon is no longer relevant. If nothing else, it does put things into perspective, onwards and upwards. Engineers who were working on new features for Stadia were not made aware, so they wasted all this time working on something for a service that's going to shut down in a couple months. Last but not least, on the consumer side of things, there are a number of concerns, namely the fact that certain Stadia exclusive games like Guild, Pixel Junk Raiders, Hello Engineer, etc. will be lost forever should Stadia shut down and should those games not be ported over at some point down the line, because these games only exist in the cloud. When you paid for these games through Stadia, you were not paying for the games themselves to be downloadable and whatnot. You were paying for access to Google servers to interact with the games that were installed in Google servers. These games can't be downloaded anywhere. When Stadia gets shut down, these games will go down with the ship. And so Jacob aptly expresses the concern that gameplay footage and trailers will be the only proof these games ever existed if they're not ported to other platforms. Fortunately, we are starting to see some developers of Stadia exclusive games talk about future plans for their titles. So right here we have the developers of Pixel Junk Raiders assuring that they are weighing their options surrounding the game's future. We hope to find a way to continue to share the vibrant worlds of Planet Tantal in the future, and we're open to discussing opportunities to find the right publishing partner to make it happen. So some Stadia exclusive games may end up being preserved after all, but there may also be some casualties along the way. There may very well be games that will go down with the Stadia ship, which means that folks who were not interested in Stadia but might have been interested in playing the game on another platform may never get the opportunity to check that game out, and that game may very well just be lost in time forever. And then another major consumer concern that's being brought up is the possibility that players might lose significant progress that they made through the Stadia version of certain games that don't currently have cross progression, whose saves cannot be transferred over. So right here, Twitter user Alexander talks about all of the progress that they've made with their Hitman saves, the 400 hours that they've put into the Stadia version of Cyberpunk 2077. Another unfortunate situation was expressed by Twitter user Color, who posted a screenshot of the almost 6,000 hours that they've put into the Stadia version of Red Dead Redemption 2, and with currently no cross progression and no word from Rockstar or Take-Two about the ability to transfer that save over to another platform. Twitter user Color posted, "No, you don't understand how seriously pissed off I am. For context, these hours are on Google Stadia, and today Google announced they'll be shutting down the platform. And with everything being in the cloud in this Stadia isolated environment, this user is begging Rockstar Games that they let Stadia users do a one-time character transfer given the 6,000 hours that Color is about to lose come January." Though some publishers and developers have gone out of their way to express that they're looking for ways for players to be able to transfer their progression and their saves. So right here, Stephen Totillo details how Ubisoft said that we'll have more specifics to share about our games on Stadia at a later date. IO Interactive put out a statement about Hitman. "To all of our Hitman fans on Google Stadia, we hear you. We're looking into ways for you to continue your Hitman experience on other platforms." So that's good, but no doubt these studios, developers, and publishers are not happy about the extra work that Google has placed on them by not warning them about this sudden shutdown. Now, for those who prefer to take matters into their own hands instead of waiting for developers to respond and to provide assurance about progression carrying over to other platforms, here's an article from 9 to 5 Google, How to Export and Download Your Game Saves from Google Stadia, published on September 30th, 2022. Today, that highlights how you can use something called Google Takeout, and there are steps here that you can potentially use to back up your saves. So this method only seems to allow you to transfer over saves to the PC version of Stadia games. So that's one potential avenue that Stadia players could pursue when it comes to progression preservation. But this is still highly inconvenient for consumers, for developers, for employees. Only time will tell how all of this develops, whether developers who were screwed by Stadia's lack of communication will get some kind of restitution, whether saves transferring on the consumer's end will be something that will be kind of rolled out over time. And we'll see how all of this will ultimately end up affecting employees who also weren't informed about any of this. This is just such a rug pull on everyone, and yet another reason for why Phil Harrison should never be placed in charge of anything, especially in the gaming space, given how much he's ruined already and continues to ruin and continues to mismanage. I'll be sure to keep you guys updated on future developments. For now, all I'll say is that Google and Stadia's handling of this whole situation has been nothing short of a disgrace. That's one man's take anyway. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on all of the activity we've seen surrounding Stadia's sudden shutdown. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.